All right. Cool. So that was Menunggu Pagi.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess just to get the ball rolling with a nice double-barreled question. First of all, then, what did you guys think of the film? And also, how was the film kind of received in Indonesia?
Yeah, the film is actually quite different than what we used to screen in our program here in general. Mostly we screen film what we call as what we categorize as art house films, much more artistic, with full of social and political interpretation and much difficult plot or complex plot. But this one is quite simple, and I don't really know how it see in Indonesia because I wasn't there when it was screened. It was just screened the end of last year in October, if I'm not mistaken. So it's pretty new. But as long as I recall, if I use social media, for example, as a kind of indicator, this film not so many people talk about this film, because if you consider the maker, that is Soeriaatmadja, is someone who's been doing film for decades, since 1999, and this is his 9th film, and mostly his films talk about difficult subjects, and usually critics praise his works, and much discussed in media. But this one is quite different. Maybe because the content and the plot is very simplistic and just linear, one night about teenagers doing that stuff. So I think it's a kind of, people don't really think about this that much. But the reason for us to select this film, to screen it here in this particular event, because we try to program what we call as the window to Indonesia, and we want to give a little bit different than something that we used to screen, something much more contemporary, something related to metropolitan and urban living that people easily connect, people easily to understand without. Well, there'll still be context that we can discuss, but looking at the plot, it's quite simplistic, it's quite easy to digest.
Right. Yeah.
Basically same like Eric, but like I came to watch this film knowing that the director is like one of our finest directors. So like of course there is like expectation that is coming, but then like if I put that aside and see that this film probably were like designed with a formula to appeal to young people as their audience and to really promote the Jakarta Warehouse project as like one of the biggest events in Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
So the story, I think like have a very simple premise. It has only like 3 stories that intertwined, and it's not so forceful how it has been done in the story. And it has everything that maybe the young people, the audience wants to see. There's a love story, there's an action, there's violence, like, and then you can see about like all this popular culture that is growing in Indonesia, like female and music, and like they're teasing about like tacky music and how EDM is like very the high thing right now. So everything is there. But supposedly I heard, like I just actually just asked a friend. I think it lasted only like less than a week in this in the cinema.
Oh wow.
And had like less than 50,000 audience actually. So like the whole formula doesn't really work for the promotion as well. Maybe because they also don't engage with like big actors or actresses.
Right.
Usually done.
Okay.
But then like I think the film actually with this simple storyline and has a lot of potential to have like a social commentary that might be not explored yet in the film. And maybe because like all the small conversations that usually appear in a film in an event on one night, so we can just like follow the settings of the city and the small conversation they have, but it's mostly about like a relationship, like love, romantic. It's not talking a lot about like Jakarta with all this changing scene, like like I would say all these urban contemporary issues. So that there are still a lot of things that can be explored in this type of film.
Right, okay. So I guess focusing on Teddy Soeriaatmadja, who wrote and directed this film. So anyone who's quite new to his work, he seems like to me like quite a progressive filmmaker compared to maybe certain other filmmakers in Indonesia, particularly in how he depicts scenes of a sexual nature. So even something that perhaps a Western audience might take for granted, like kissing scenes, for example, which are traditionally being fairly taboo, I guess, in Indonesia. He tends to take quite a modern approach with that. So I just wondered why you think he does this, what his kind of stance is when it comes to filmmaking.
Yeah. As long as I know Teddy, he operates in the circumstance that he has to produce one for you, one for me. You know what I mean? Like he did some commission work for such as these kinds, and sometimes also basically he gets his main earnings from making commercials rather than making films, because the films industry, even though is thriving in Indonesia, but looking at his style, it's rather difficult for him to get the job that he really wants.
Right.
You were talking about his trilogy. It's a trilogy consists of 3 films: The Lovely Man, something in the way,
Right.
and the third one I forgot. But that trilogy, I remember we invited Teddy to London back in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, and he talked about that trilogy, very trilogy. He really wants to make film that can express his main concerns about Indonesia, which is sexuality, how sexuality is expressed in Indonesia. So that's why the Lovely Man tells about a man who underwent a situation where he became transgender, and his daughter came from the countryside to visit him and to ask him to consult her problem, and then it becomes a very interesting road movie between the two, because the characters develop so much during the trip, and something in the way it's about a guy who wants to be a hero. He's basically a loser who watched porn film all the time, but then he found some kind of revelation when he attended some kind of Islamic teachings, and he went from one extreme to another. Then he became something else. He tried to imagine himself of being a hero and ended up being a suicide bomber. So it's a very interesting film, and both films, the third one I haven't seen from the trilogy, but the second one, Something on the Way, never really screened in Indonesia. Lovely Man managed to be screened in a festival, a small festival, the Q Film Festival. It's the opening film, based on invitation only because of the sensitivity of the subject. But Something on the Way has never been screened in Indonesia. I think even the world premiere was here in London and saw us in the gallery, because the film was pretty new, they just done with it, and because he did his study in London and feels that London is his second home, so he doesn't mind to screen it in London, and he attended the screening as well. Both of the films very well received by critics, even when Something Along the Way never really gets screened, but it was some critics noticed the film from some festivals and some screenings in film clubs, and I think that I read some reviews about the film, but for Lovely Man it was very well received. So that's how I call Teddy as one for you and one for me. So all these trilogies made based fully on his with his own money. So yeah. Because he knows that he won't get anyone to take this kind of project. So,
which in some ways, not that it's understandable, but if it's not going to be able to be released. That must be quite a big sticking point.
Yeah.
For a lot of people. And what were the main reasons why some of his films, would have trouble being released? Is it because of the censorship issues, or just people that it wouldn't really be a general interest?
I think for Lovely Man, it managed to get screened in some clubs, and it's also produced in DVD, in cinema as well, yeah, for a short period of time. So it doesn't have any problems with censorship, but something on the way it's not going to be screened, because I think it's more vulgar in terms of the depiction of sexuality. It's very vulgar. The transition between of this person from someone who was born all day into a suicide bomber. It's very sensitive if you consider in Indonesian setting.
Right. Okay. So it's touchy subject.
It is very touchy.
I guess one of the key focuses of this particular film was the Dewa Hair music festival that you see in the film. So that was actually based on a real annual event, if I'm not mistaken, that's held in Jakarta.
Yes.
And I understand that in the last year or two there's been a bit of controversy surrounding it in general. I'm not sure if it's related to this film in any way, but I wondered if you could touch on what you know about that.
I've never been there.
I've never been to Jakarta Warehouse Project as well. I mean, like.
Are you just saying that for the camera? Or?
But like, I'm millennials as well, but like the old millennials.
Right. Okay.
But like, I know about this event for a long time, and I know lots of like young people go there, and it's like really the thing. But I think it's never really become so interesting for the reputation of its like being overcrowded, and that kind of event, like you go to a lot of booze and drugs, and then it can be rainy. It's outdoor. I mean, like people can have fun there, but it doesn't have like the chill reputation or something. But it's just like, I think Indonesia as well wants to have like an event that is just like considered international, and this is how Jakarta Warehouse Project has been like projected by the tourism, and and they kind of boast that they managed to get like 20,000 international guests to coming from all over the world in the last edition stuff. But I think like maybe there's like a documentary about Jakarta Warehouse Project. It's open as well, so I think they just want to also promote it better than before. And then, as you can see, like during the film, it's like DWP, like, and then you see all the characters actually are trying to be just to enjoy the event without any kind of substances, like the initial thing. Like you have these three characters who say like, okay, we gotta enjoy this thing tonight without any drugs, that kind of thing. And then like, you have police seizing the area, finding drug dealers. And then the drug dealer character as well, he wants to quit.
Right.
So all those kind of thing, I don't know. It's not like a reality that maybe we can see in real. It's like portrayed maybe it's like softened down because it's like commissioned by Jakarta Warehouse Project as well, but we don't see it like as strong as
Right.
it could be.
So this film was actually partly commissioned?
I don't know that.
Oh, right.
But they sponsored the footage for sure.
Right.
Yeah. It is quite interesting to talk about DWP in particular because of it started as some kind of underground movement back in 2018 when in a club called Blowfish, and there was they held this kind of annual event where they for some kind of rave party, this kind of subculture, and at one point there was an accident where two people get killed during the event, and the police stopped altogether the Blowfish rave party, and then they want to have something different, and then they start to throw this idea it's the original name was Blowfish Warehouse Project, and it becomes it turned into DWP Jakarta Warehouse Project. Interestingly, within 10 years, even less than that, it became the biggest electronic dance music festival in Asia. So, and it's located in Indonesia. So it's really defying the depiction of Indonesia as the country that goes into Sharia, or with the most Muslim population in the world, because there's tradition. We can say that the culture doesn't really belong to Islam or to Muslim lifestyle. Even though in 2018, starting in 2017, there's already some small protests against the DWP, because they said that it promotes hedonism, drugs, alcohol, and all those kind of ideas being thrown into the public. And in 2017, if you remember, that the governor elected, the new governor of Jakarta is Anies Baswedan. He is elected, supported by the Islamic groups, even some radical Islamists who held big rally to support him in 2016. And during Anies Baswedan's tenure, he said that he will control DWP and will do the DWP within the purview of the Eastern values, what he calls as Eastern values, which means no drugs, no alcohol. And alcohol selling is banned in 2018, and also he works together with the anti-narcotics police force to do some kind of raid, and even to have additional guards. That's why I think in 2018 DWP moved to Bali.
Right.
They don't do it in Jakarta for 2018 edition, and they went to Bali to.
Would that make it DWP now?
They make it into DWP X. With the X, well, Bali becomes some kind of safe haven for people who wants to continue with lifestyle that won't attract that kind of antagonism from the Islamic group. So in Bali, it happened to be bigger than ever. That's
right.
The bigger DWP. They call it DWP X, and they have 3 days rather than 2.
Right. Okay.
With the lineup they post to, to cover the mainstream electronic music and much more underground.
Right. Okay.
So
That's interesting. So in some ways it might have actually backfired in terms of instead of clamping down on the festival, it actually ends up getting bigger somehow, albeit in a different location.
yeah, because it's also easy to sell Bali. Say what we think about the international market, people don't have to ask where Bali is. It's quite clear for the organizer that they take benefit from the situation to move it into Bali and to hold it in Garuda Wisnu Kencana.
Yeah, Garuda,
Yeah.
which was like they just launched the statue. It is like considered the highest statue.
Yeah, the highest statue in
Yeah,
Southeast
so they
Asia.
kind of need the momentum as well to boast Indonesia.
Right.
So it's a big tourism event for Indonesia. They will become bigger than they planned, and the notion to shut it down fire to make it just bigger.
Right. Okay. And yeah, just in case anyone was wondering, it's their webpair for Jakarta Warehouse Project, but because they're spelling Jakarta with DJ as opposed to J, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like the film came out at quite an interesting time then, because it must have come out, it came out in 2018, around the time that all of that was kind of kicking off. Is there any impact on that? I mean, I know the audience numbers were pretty low. Is there any correlation possibly, or?
Probably, I think the mood is quite changing now, especially in Jakarta, and with just according to the survey, the recent survey, become one of the most intolerant cities in the country.
Right.
In terms of multiculturalism and acceptance to this kind of lifestyles. It's also because the victory of the current governor, and Baswedan, is supported by the Islamic groups who now can be more eloquent, not eloquent, but much more upfront in terms of advancing the new ideas to link the city administration to some Islamic angles.
Right.
For example, one of the controversies is a hotel and club called Alexis. It's known for these kind of lifestyle as well, and drugs and narcotics, and then prostitution as well, mostly prostitution, high class prostitution. And there's been saying that this Alexis must be shut down altogether, and it's a kind of challenge because the previous governor was Kijaya Purnama of Ahok, which is very strong and firm in terms of combating corruption. He said that I cannot close down Alexis because it's backed up by some big names. But then it becomes a challenge. Anis made a promise during his campaign that if I were elected to be governor, I would close down Alexis. And they managed to close down Alexis, and there was even the discussion to change Alexis into public class. Alexis it's an Islamic word for one of the verses in the Quran. And they closed down Alexis for a while, but I think they just changed the name, but we don't really know what happened. But ceremoniously, Anis closed down the club in Alexis.
Right. Did anyone have any questions themselves as well?
I have several.
Oh, excellent.
Some of them have already been answered, but I was just wondering, touching on something that you mentioned, and I think you did too as well, but I was just wondering whether or not, okay, we have seen snippets of the Rio Festival, but would you say the festival was really, while it was in Jakarta, Bali is a totally different story, but would you say that while it was still taking place in Jakarta, was that representative of Jakarta youth? Was that something that was that people could express themselves through, in other venues or through other means, or was that a one-off, like an annual event where people could go and dance, and let their hair hang out, for instance, or would you say that was representative in that sense, or was that a once in a year event and that was it, and that was nothing of the sort?
I think
It's
it's the youth.
Our ambassador of all Indonesian millennials.
Yes.
the target market.
I'm not sure, but I feel it's like a representative of to high class millennials, not like all the millennials in Indonesia, and it's actually a bit contradictory for me when they kind of put a final store in the story, and that all the pasar santa is like all the symbolism of like hipster youth lifestyle in Indonesia, because then like the things like Jakarta Warehouse Project is like very rave. So there's like for people who likes to party, but like like the hipster, they listen to music that other people don't listen, like the majority doesn't listen, and that's why they go to the South Jakarta area where they have like this vinyl store, and they have their own festival, much more intimate, much smaller, and like you can they have like performance from all around the world, from the band that I don't even know, and it's really going. I just had a friend here who works for like a record company in London. It's very niche, like independent, and then he just asked me, I promote a band called Far, and like I put it on YouTube, and then suddenly that it has like thousands of views from Indonesia, the country that I don't even like, that's not even on my radar. I didn't promote anything, but I just put it on YouTube, and they just like consume it like that. And like, what happened actually, what kind of scene actually is happening in Indonesia? And then they invite the band all the way from London to perform in Bandung somehow. So that was like, I think like we just like the young people, they're just like very tech savvy, they are very into social media, they are very into digital culture, and they just like absorb everything from all around the world, not only the popular one. So it's like the youth are divided by these hipsters and by these people who are actually with the rave party. So I thought like it's a bit contradictory to see like a panel store.
Yeah, but I think this type of party and dance culture has been thriving for a while in Indonesia. If we see the history, it started maybe in the 60s and 70s with the governor at the time, Ali Sadikin, who tried to invite much more investors by putting in Jakarta, the capital city, in with some kind of international facade, and as part of it is to open some kind of what he calls as familiar to Western culture. We open some clubs, pubs, and pubs. We call it pubs, even though it's a club and more of a dance place rather than drinking place. And Ali Sadikin even invest in a beer company because he knows that beer is strictly regulated and with high taxation. So the Jakarta government will get a big chunk of money from the sale of alcohol, and it's controlled. He even opened a gambling parlor, which considered to be around forbidden in Islam. It's quite interesting how these culture then developed in Indonesia, starting from 70s, 80s, 90s. Even though some of it, like growing much more in the underground scene rather than being a mainstream culture. So it's a kind of subculture in Indonesia, but it never fade away. It's been there for decades. So this type of event, it's much more of a catharsis rather than something based on steady and stable culture. But I can say that there's some kind of sociological background and some kind of subculture support to this event, to these kinds of events. So that's why we can see that starting from a very underground culture, it becomes one of the biggest in Asia. It can't grow that big if there's no culture to support it locally. I think it has to start from the locals, then it goes somewhere. So I think it's combination of subculture and catharsis as well, because I know some people who came to DWP and they even not in their 20s, they were even in their 40s, they still came to DWP just to have this kind of catharsis.
I know the director and the producer actually went to DWP.
I'm quite sure. The producer I think is I know the producer personally, and he's been into this kind of subculture. I think it's a kind of maybe there's some kind of his personal venture to make this film. If you think the producer, so he wants to promote this. He also wants to clean DWP from drugs. If you see that the lead characters, it's like Farah said, don't want to use drug and enjoying DWP, and the drug dealer is quitting, and police will be there to raid you if you try to, It's a clear message. It seems that he wants to clean DWP from those kind of images as well.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, when you mentioned that the director, he had to use his own money, to make his movies. I'm not sure if all of them, but at least some of them. And if they haven't been screened for whatever reason, that often in Indonesia, And also with this new push drive into a more conservative society, do you feel like there will continue to be room, you know, for independent filmmakers, let me call them that way, to be able to express themselves through movies, or is that going to be harder and harder? How do you see that, you know, moving forward?
Interestingly, Indonesian film industry is thriving. We used to have like 600 screens back in 2008, but then we had this policy to open foreign investment in 100% foreign investment in film industry, and all of a sudden we have 2,000 screens. With the jump of the numbers, then the films produced also growing significantly. And the number of audience also jumped very high from around 18 million back in 2018 to 50 million now. And there's always the room for something quite idiosyncratic or unique to go through the cinema, even though the makers usually don't really consider it to be a hit. For them, it's enough if the film screen, and then they also sometimes, most of the time, they consider international festivals to be their market as well, even though they don't get so much money from international festivals. But it will increase their profile, and it will be easier for them to get money from public funding, not from commercial funding, but from grants such as mostly international public funding, because in Indonesia we just recently opened domestic funding, but it's not working yet. People are still working on how the mechanism, how you really invest in something intangible such as film, and you don't really have any clear calculation when you're talking about the return of investment and those kind of stuff. So it's still challenging, but with the growing industry, I think the room is still, it's opening a little bit. And it's also fortunate for us that alternative venues for film screening is also growing. It starts with community screenings that you screen films to 30 audience, but now it becomes a much more and more independent room. And people are now willing to pay to go into those kind of screenings. It's different with 2010, for example. People tend to think that those kind of screening venues, it's just for films that don't go through the big cinema, and then you don't have to pay because it's second class, second rate. But now it's totally different. The culture is different, because the distributors start to think that we have to charge them. Then they'll be responsible to come, and they will pay, and it will create new culture, and it happened quite fast actually. Even though for some of them they have to travel throughout the country to guarantee they have a good partner in terms of the screening venues, because the screening venues, the independent screening venues are scattered. It doesn't belong to one group or whatever, so they have to go one by one to talk with them, to build the trust, and also to ensure the quality, so the audience will be satisfied watching the films. All those things has to be done, and some producers even have to go literally traveling around the year to ensure that these kind of screening venues can be built into something different than just some people gathering and watching films. So I think it's already created a market, even smaller, but sometimes it's enough for some filmmakers for the film to be screened in those venues, because it's also interesting how Indonesian filmmakers can produce film with the shoestring budget, because of the probably it's part of the resilience when we don't really have any support for the industry back in the late 90s, some filmmakers just go with whatever available in terms of equipment and ask their friends to make films. They don't really care about how getting money back from the films. They just want to make films. They just want to express themselves. And they have this kind of habit. They have this kind of tradition and network as well. And I think network is the most important part, because sometimes they exchange resources. Whenever they want to make films, they ask their friend and they will return it back someday. You know, so it's like a joint cooperation between individuals. So, yeah, I think besides the big industry, big names and studios such as this one, IFS is quite big, supported by, even though the owners is just
cigarette company.
yeah, it's backed by a cigarette company, because the owner is the lawyer of that cigarette company, and he managed to get this cigarette company to back him with this film. But there's also some smaller ones, some smaller production. Yeah.
Just one quick question.
Yeah.
I mean, from all the islands, somebody chose, let's go with this project to Bali. So how is Bali seen from the other islands and from Indonesia? And do you think that in the future somebody's clamped down on this more easygoing lifestyle in Bali?
Yeah. It's already been, it's widely talked about how Bali become an enclave in terms of, it's like sometimes people see it as a refuge for people who's not accepted by this kind of growing culture of Islamism in Indonesia. Or I can give an example of my friend, the former editor-in-chief of Playboy Indonesia, Soeriaatmadja, who just moved to Bali to avoid any kind of, because he was sentenced to jail for 1.5 years because of publishing Playboy magazine in Indonesia after a series of demonstrations, and then he was sentenced to jail for 1.5 years, and he, at one point, he filed a judicial review and he managed to be acquitted. Sometimes I think 2012, 13, and then he moved to Bali just to have a different kind of atmosphere for him. I don't know if, and I don't know how it's going to be in the future. Now, it's quite interesting how the ideas of Islam and Sharia are also trying to be, it's a kind of, even, I don't know how people in Bali see the rest of the country, because Bali already declared that this is an open area, this is a very tolerant island. But then, for example, during this presidential election, one of the candidates, the vice president candidate, just throw an idea of halal tourism even in Bali. It's raised an alarm in Bali as well. Why do you need to develop halal tourism in Bali? Bali already have their own.
It's not Muslim area.
It's not Muslim area, predominantly Hindu. And Bali doesn't really need promotion. What we need is to have even control to tourism, because it's overcrowded in some areas. And resources is getting worse and worse in Bali. Water resources, traffic jam now. Why don't you try to open it, for example, in Lombok, the next island to Bali, which is predominantly Muslim, for example. So I think that's how this idea has been thrown to the public, to have some kind of, I don't know, probably it's part of the bigger game to give a sense that Indonesia is heading into that direction. Luckily that he didn't win, so we still have this idea of tolerance and multiculturalism in Indonesia. It's like the winner nowadays. We don't know until when, but we want to uphold it.
Bali now is more about ecological problems.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
all this land information.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the tourism industry doesn't come with strict regulation on waste. So plastics, like straws, and the waste management in Bali and water management is not really good. And if you talk about the law enforcement, it's also quite bad in Bali. In some areas, it's already difficult to get clean water. In Kuta, for example, you have to import water from some other areas. There's already some prediction about what the scarcity in Bali, because it's an island and it's quite small, it's not that big, you can't really rely on rainwater, and the water management is bad, so it becomes a bigger issue in Bali.
Well, I guess we'll bring an end to things. I'd like to thank you guys for coming along.
And for staying as well.
For staying.
Asking difficult questions.
It's interesting question. Interesting.
Yeah, thanks for ignoring the lovely weather outside and coming inside instead. Thanks to Eric and Bara for your insights as ever. Also thanks to the National Organising Committee for Indonesia as Market Focused Country 2019 London Book Fair, and the SOAS Indonesian Society for making this all happen. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.